Dear friends, I'm happy to welcome you to my channel. Переводит сегодня для вас и в будущем всегда Aly White. Вяжем мы сегодня с вами майку-разгильдяйку с 100% хлопка.
So the translation for you will be done by Aly White. We're knitting a freestyle t-shirt and we're going to be using the 100% cotton thread for that.
Метраж пряжи, из которой мы будем с вами вязать, в 100 граммах 395 метров.
So the gauge for this thread in 100 grams, there are 395 meters.
Вязать я буду на машине Brother.
I will be knitting on the machine Brother.
Для этой майки подойдет любая однофантурная машина.
But in fact, you can use any standard gauge knitting machine for this simple t-shirt.
Плотность вязания 8.
We will be using tension 8.
Ширина в 40 петлях 12,5.
40 stitches equal 12.5 centimeters.
Высота в 60 рядах 15.
60 rows are equal 15 centimeters.
Итак, мы с вами свяжем несложную модель, но очень оригинальную. Я уверена, она всем вам понравится. Вы с легкостью ее свяжете.
So this garment is going to be very simple, but at the same time, I'm positive you're going to like it.
Вам потребуется всего лишь 300 грамм 100% хлопка.
All you need is 300 grams of 100% cotton thread.
Итак, давайте приступим.
So let's start.
Мы с вами возьмем петлю-уловитель.
So we're starting with the latched tool.
Майка, которую мы с вами будем вязать, подойдет для размеров от M до XL.
So t-shirt will fit anywhere between size M all the way to size XL. So we're going to be knitting this whole t-shirt in one detail. And to start, we're going to do crochet cast on, and we're going to cast on 80 stitches. So we're doing the crochet cast on using your latched tool. You want to make sure that your cast on is not too tight. Try to make it fairly loose. I personally prefer using latched tool for the bulky machine on my standard gauge machine. This helps me to keep my cast on fairly loose, just loose enough, so you don't have to worry about it being too tight. It will be really helpful if you could find the latched tool that's similar to the one that I have. So you have the bulky on one side and standard gauge on the other side. You should put the last stitch on the last needle. Once again, make sure that your cast on is loose enough. If your stitches are moving freely along the needles, you've done everything correctly. They should be moving easily through the latches on the needles. Row counter set to 0. Our tension is 8, so we start our knitting. This is important. You need to make sure that your weaving brushes are down, engaged in the work. It's important for two reasons. First of all, this is how we can avoid using weights. And secondly, your knitting fabric wouldn't be falling off your needles.
Мы провязали первый ряд и первые 188 рядов мы вяжем просто прямо.
So we knitted our first row, and the following 188 rows you're knitting straight, just going back and forth with your carriage. As you can see, I can easily knit without weights as long as I'm using my weaving brushes.
If you believe in love, how will I feel it? If
So we have knitted 188 rows, and we are ready now to start adding our sleeves.
Карета справа, с правой стороны набираем петли на оставшиеся или машину до сотой включительно.
Your carriage is on the right now, and you're starting casting on the E-wrap cast on all the rest of the needles on the right up to the needle number 100. So once again, you want to make sure that your cast on is loose enough, and we're using E-wrap cast on. Keep your weaving brushes engaged. Carefully knitting one row from right to left.
Карета слева, с левой стороны выполняем абсолютно аналогичное действие. До соты выдвигаем петли, набираем петли методом омыва.
So now your carriage is on the left, and you do exactly the same thing on the left side. You're casting on the remaining needles using the E-wrap cast on all the way to needle number 100. Be sure that your cast on is loose enough, because you will be moving your carriage, and if your cast on is not loose enough, you will most likely break your thread. Please turn the hold function on your carriage.
С левой стороны переведите петли в переднее рабочее положение.
On the left side, the side where your carriage is on, push all the needles with stitches that you've just cast on to the D position. On the right side, all the needles from number 100 to number 88, you need to push forward to the position E. So all the needles up to needle 82. Needle 82 will stay in position B. Rest of the needles to the right from needle 82 on the right side should be in the hold position. And we will continue knitting. Now again, your carriage needs to be switched to knitting hold position on. So wrap needle number 83, the rest of the needles to the right from needle 82 stay on hold. To the left of 0, you keep in work 82 needles. The rest of them from 83 to 100 push forward to holding position.
Придерживая рабочую нить, левой рукой чуть немного опущенной, аккуратно проводите нитку справа налево.
Slightly pulling your thread up with your left hand, carefully knit one row from right to left.
С левой стороны выполняем аналогичное действие. Выполняем отбив в 83 деgree.
And wrap 83rd needle on the left the same way you did it on the right. On the right side, push 3 needles to D position. So we have 85 needles in work on the right, 3 of them in D position.
Аккуратно придерживая рабочую нить левой рукой из-за того, что и мы работаем с частичным вязанием при опущенных щетках пилинга. Чтобы рабочая нить не запуталась в щетках пилинга, придерживаем рабочую нить левой рукой, проходим один ряд вправо.
And again, reminding you to pull your thread up slightly. The reason being your weaving brushes are engaged and you're doing the partial knitting. So you want to make sure that your thread is not caught on the brushes. Wrap needle number 86 on the right and simultaneously on the left, push to working position 3 needles in the position D, it's upper working position. So on the left, to the left from 0, you will have 85 needles total in working position.
Проходим вверх, вправо.
Knitting 1 row from right to left. Push to the upper working position, position D, 2 needles on the right side. So now you should have 87 needles in work to the right of 0.
Провязываем ряд слева направо, выполняем обвив соседних или передним рабочим положением.
Keep wrapping the first needles on each side, the first holding needles on each side. So before you knit from left to right, make sure that you wrap your needle number 86. And then we knit from left to right. And wrap again.
С левой стороны выполняем абсолютно зеркальное аналогичное действие.
Left side, we do exactly the same thing that we did on the right. So you push to the upper working position, position D, 2 needles. Knit 1 row from right to left and wrap the first holding needle. Push to position D, 3 needles on the right. So now we have 90 needles in work on the right. Knit 1 row from left to right. Wrap. Push back to the upper working position, position D, 3 needles on the left. So now we have 90 needles to the left of 0 as well as to the right of 0.
Провязываем ряд.
Knit 1 row from right to left.
Выполняем обвив.
Wrap.
197 ряд на счетчике.
The row counter shows 97.
2 иглы справа вводим в рабочее положение.
2 more needles pushing back to the upper working position on the right.
В работе справа 92 иглы.
So we have 92 needles now to the right of 0.
Провязываем ряд слева направо.
Knitting 1 row from left to right. Wrap. Now we do exact same thing on the left.
Провязываем ряд справа налево.
Knit 1 row from right to left.
Выполняем обвив.
Wrap. On the right side, push to the working position, 3 more needles. Upper working position, 3 more needles. So now you should have 95 needles to the right of 0 in work. Knit 1 more row from left to right. Wrap. Now you do exact same thing on the right. So you push to the upper working position, 3 more needles. So we have 200 on our row counter. So now we're gonna have some fun. We're gonna add some holes to our t-shirt just to make it really freestyle. Well, I'm using most of my thread in knitting, but I still have the swatch that I can use for this particular purpose. So I can undo my swatch and use the thread from it to make our holes. Make sure that you have tail long enough. So we're casting off using an extra thread 30 stitches in the center, starting from 15 on the left and all the way to 15 on the right. You need to try to keep these stitches loose but uniform at the same time. You should put the last stitch on the needle number 15, and on the left the first stitch put on the needle number 16. So you push these needles, the ones that you just cast off, to the E position, to the holding position, and you cast on stitches on these needles using chain or crochet cast on with the long tail of this extra thread that we left for that particular purpose earlier. So the last stitch you should put on the needle number 16 to the right of 0. On the right from 0, push the holding position needles from number 1 to number 20. Do some ear wraps on these needles in holding position to make sure that we weave in our tails as we go, and you'll be able to cut it off right away and not worry about it later. So to weave in the second tail, you'll have to do the reverse ear wrap. You do the ear wrap to the left. Now make sure that your thread is carrying under the needles, not over it. And these ear wraps need to be fairly loose, but as uniform as possible. So we'll continue ear wraps all the way to the needle number 20 on the left. Push these needles from holding position to upper working position or position D. Knit one row from right to left. On the right hand side, you add 2 more needles to upper working position. So on the right, we have 97 needles now. Knit one row from left to right. Wrap on the right side. On the left side, you do exactly the same thing. And you can cut those little tails off now because we wove them earlier and they won't come undone. So as you can see, our decorative hole now is very neat looking and you don't see any tails sticking out. We need one row from right to left. Wrap on the carriage side. Push the rest of the needles in holding position on the right back to the upper working position. Knit one row from left to right. Switch off the partial knitting setting or the hold position on your carriage. And we need straight 24 rows. All needles are in working position. The row 2230 and we're gonna add some more holes to our freestyle t-shirt. So again, you want to leave a long tail with your extra thread that you're going to use to make that hole. You cast off with your latched tool 15 needles in the center. So you start with needle number 25 on the left and you cast off all the way to needle 25 on the right. So after you finish casting off these 50 central stitches, you will need to cast them back on using ear wrap cast on, exactly same way we did for our first hole. The last stitch on your latchet tool, you put as a second stitch on the needle number 26 on the right. The first cast off stitch on the left we put as a second stitch on the needle number 26 on the left. We do this to avoid extra holes there. Now we use our long tail that we left at the beginning, and we do crochet or chain stitch cast on. So the last stitch on your latched tool, you're putting on the needle number 26 on the right. Push the cast on stitches back against the gate pegs. On the left and on the right of the stitches, of the needles, that you just cast on, add extra 5 needles to holding position. E-wrap the remaining tail over the needles in holding position.
Следите за тем, чтобы петли не были затянуты.
Again, it's extremely important to keep this cast on fairly loose. So ideally, you will have your cast on and the E-wrap that we're doing right now of about same tension. So they both should be equally loose. This will help make our hole, the decorative holes, really neat. So we need 10 more rows. After you've finished your row number 231, you can take your scissors and cut those tails off. So as you can see, we have no tails sticking out, and our cast on and cast off stitches look really, really neat. We have knitted 240 rows. We just have 40 more rows left before we start knitting the back of our t-shirt. And we have knitted exactly half of the width of our sleeves. So let's have even more fun and add some funny holes to our sleeves. So again, as we did before, we want to leave a long tail for our extra thread. And we're going to cast off stitches starting with needle number 90 on the left, all the way to needle number 50 on the left. So we're casting off 40 stitches on the left, starting with stitch number 90 all the way to stitch number 50. So let me explain a little bit more about the long tail here and why I asked you to keep this long tail on the left side. So as you're casting off the stitches, provided that you're a right-handed person, and I am a right-handed person, I know for the beginners especially, it's extremely difficult to cast off the uniform stitches from left to right and then from right to left. The fact that we left this long tail on the left side will assist you to make the uniform stitches. So basically you will have better chances to make uniform stitches going from left to right and from right to left. The illusion of simplicity for this t-shirt is really an illusion, because you will have some hard times making those holes, making those decorative holes, and achieving that neat look for them. But if you have some practice in casting off stitches, casting on stitches from right to left and from left to right, or you forgot to left this tail on the left side, you still have an option to cast on going from right to left. It's not going to be as easy, especially if you're righty, but it's still possible.
В любом случае, это станет хорошей практикой.
On the other hand, this will be a great practice for you. So I did this particular cast on from right to left just to show you that it's possible. But again, I want to warn you, this is not a comfortable way of casting on if you are a righty. Similarly to our previous holes, we are doing ear wrap to weave our tails in as we go. So on the left side, I still have this long tail that I left and then pretended that I forgot about it. I didn't use it to do the chain cast on, but it's still useful to do the ear wrap. So I continue my ear wrap beyond the actual hole to weave in the ends. Now we do the mirror image of our hole on the right side. It is entirely up to you how wide or narrow you make these holes. If you don't like the idea of having holes in your sleeves, you don't have to make them at all. So on the right side of the needle bed, for our right sleeve, we do exactly same thing as we did for the left sleeve. So your hole is going to be exactly same width, and we're doing the exactly same manipulations with our stitches. After you cast off and cast back on the same stitches as you did on the left side, you knit one row from right to left. Cut off all the tails you have after this first row, because they're all woven in and they're not going anywhere. So now you're going to knit straight all the way to row 280. The row counter is at 280. We have knitted exactly half of our future t-shirt. We're going to cast off central 80 stitches. As usual, we're going to leave a long tail for this extra thread before we start casting off. Since we already have several holes before this main one, we don't really need to do any extra manipulations. So currently we're working on our neckline. And for our neckline, we're casting off central 80 stitches, 40 on the left and 40 on the right. And again, since we already made a couple of decorative holes below it, we won't need to do any special partial knitting or any other kind of manipulation for our neckline. And of course, you need to keep in mind the placing of your holes. You probably wouldn't want your underwear showing through it. But then again, if that's your goal, go for it. And if you feel like it, if you feel particularly naughty, you can make the extra large holes in your t-shirt. I want my holes on my t-shirt be a tiny bit naughty, but not too naughty, so you won't see the underwear through my holes on my t-shirt. So by now you should know the drill. We're going to cast off those stitches and then we will cast them back on, just as we did for our previous holes. And at the end we will weave the tails in by using extra 5 needles on both sides. So by now we've used up half of our gauge swatch. So we're recycling the thread that otherwise you would probably throw away. I'm knitting my top, my t-shirt, using 100% cotton thread. But you can go wild. You can use any kind of thread you feel like knitting with. For example, you can use viscose, you can use microfiber, you can use some mixed threads, maybe viscose and cotton, for example. You probably want something light and nice so you can wear it in summer. So it's extremely easy to check if your cast on is loose enough. So you just move your transfer tool back and forth. And if they move very easily, that means that you did it right. So if your stitches are not gliding easily back and forth on your needles, I highly recommend that you undo your cast on and do it again. Otherwise, if you decide to proceed with your fairly tight cast on, you are asking for all kinds of troubles. Your needles could get broken, or you can damage your carriage, or both. If you're using a thread that are meant for hand knitting, I highly recommend that you wax it. And by the thread for hand knitting, we usually mean thread in skeins, not on cones. After we're done with our neckline, we're ready to show our beautiful shoulders to the world. So let's make a fairly small hole on our shoulders, starting from the left side, starting with needle 90 on the left, to needle, well, let's say 65 on the left. But again, you're the boss. If you feel like wider holes, go for it. Please repeat the manipulations on the right side, the same way we're doing right now on the left side. It's probably a good idea to keep our t-shirt symmetrical. Please don't forget to do the E-wrap on the neighboring needles, about 5 needles on both sides of the cast-on stitches. It will help you to hide your tails and also make sure that they won't come undone. But most importantly, it will save you a lot of time. So after your garment is done, you don't have to worry about the loose tails and weaving them in. So as we finished with the half of our t-shirt, we set the row counter to 0, 0, 0. Knit 1 row from right to left. Finishing our neckline. Cut the loose tails off. I'm moving the fabric to the front so you can see what we have so far. So we need 40 rows straight. The row counter is 40, and we start making more holes in our t-shirt. So we're going to add the mirror image of our front, same holes we're going to make in the back for our sleeves, as well as the holes in the middle of the garment. So on the left hand side, again, remember to leave a long tail. So we're casting off stitches on the left side, starting with needle 90 to needle 50 on the left. Therefore, you're casting off and then casting on 40 stitches on each side in the same row. So again, you know the drill. We cast off 40 stitches and then we cast on 40 stitches using chain or crochet cast on. I'm sure once you feel comfortable knitting this t-shirt, your imagination will go wild and you will come up with all kinds of opportunities to use these decorative holes and designs in your future garments. Please don't forget to check your cast on, making sure that it's loose enough, using your transfer tool. By the way, there's absolutely no need to wait 24 to 48 hours after you wash and steam your gauge swatch. You can do the experiment and find out for yourself that nothing's going to happen to it. You might want to draw the line between the bread dough and knitted garment. As you know, for the yeast dough, as you're making bread, you probably want to wait until the yeast is active. This does not apply to knitted garments. So on the right side, for the right sleeve, please make the identical hole as for the left. So we're casting off and then casting on 40 stitches from needle 50 on the right to needle 90 on the right. Before you start your cast on, don't forget to put the end stitch on both sides of the cast off stitches to the edge needles. This will help you to keep your decorative holes neat. If you haven't had much experience with E-wrap before knitting this garment, I promise you after finishing this garment you will have enough experience and will feel very confident doing E-wrap on both sides. You will not only practice cast on and cast off, you will also end up with an interestingly looking, unusual garment. One more hole, just one more hole in the back. After all, there should be a difference between the front and the back, otherwise it would be just way too boring. So let's cast off middle 40 central stitches, starting with 20 on the left to 20 on the right. Cast off 40 stitches in the middle of your garment, and now we're casting them back on. And E-wrapping the loose ends to make sure we don't have to take care of them later. T-shirt, this will be the last hole. But if you would prefer more holes, knock yourself out. Add more holes to your garment. And I would highly recommend considering placing your holes wisely so your garments are not peeking through them. Knit one row from right to left. The tails off. By the way, you probably noticed first row after we cast on those holes is fairly tight and not going as easily as the rest of them. That's totally normal as long as you keep your cast on loose enough. So we're knitting 36 rows straight. So the row counter is at row 77, and we're starting to join our sleeves together. Please switch to the partial knitting mode according to the instructions or manual of your machine. On the right side, opposite to the carriage, 2 needles to the E or holding position.
Провяжите ряд слева направо.
Wrap. On the left side, do exactly the same. 2 needles, push forward, holding position.
Право налево.
Knit one row and wrap. Row counter is at 79 and we have 98 needles on the left. On the right side, opposite the carriage, push 3 needles up to holding position. So we have 95 needles in working position on the right.
Провяжите ряд слева направо.
Knit one row from left to right and do the wrap. Push 3 needles on the left to holding position And our row counter is at 80, and we have 95 needles in work on the left. Knit one row and wrap. Row counter at 81. So push 3 needles on the right to holding position. So you will have 92 needles in work on the right. Knit one row from left to right. Wrap. Push 3 needles to holding position on the left. You will have 92 needles in work on the left after that. Knit one row and wrap. Push 2 needles to holding position on the right. You will end up with 90 needles on the right in working position. Knit one row from left to right and wrap. Push 2 needles to holding position on the left. Knit one row and wrap. Row counter is at 85. Push 2 more needles on the right side opposite the carriage to holding position. Knit one row from left to right and wrap. Push 2 more needles to holding position on the left, so you should have 88 needles in work on the left. Row counter is at 87. On the right side, push 3 more needles to holding position. Knit one row from left to right. Repeat the same for the left side. Push 3 more needles to holding position and knit one row. Row counter is at 89. Push 2 more needles on the right side opposite the carriage to holding position. Now you should have 83 needles in working position on the right. So repeat this for the left side as well. Row counter is at 90. Knit one row and wrap. Row counter is at 91. You push 3 more needles to holding position on the right opposite the carriage. You should have 80 needles in working position on the right. Knit one row from left to right and wrap. Do the same for the left side, and you should have 80 needles in working position on the left after that. Knit one row from right to left and wrap. Take a transfer tool, any transfer tool that you have handy, and join the right sleeve together. So you're picking up half of the stitch alongside the edge. Unwrap the edge so you can clearly see the edge stitches, and it's very important to use half the stitch, not the full stitch. So we're putting half of the stitches at the edge of the front side of the sleeve on the needles where we have the second half of the sleeve. So push your needles on the right back from holding position to upper working position or position D. Knit one row from left to right. Now you're casting off this sleeve stitches all together. So just a reminder, we put 20 stitches on our needles, and now we're casting these 20 stitches off, forming the sleeve. So if you recall, when we were working on the front of our t-shirt, we cast on extra 20 stitches that formed our sleeve. So now we're doing the reverse. We're casting them off, finishing our sleeve. Those 20 needles that you just cast off push them back to non-working position or position A. On the left side, you do exactly the same. You fold your sleeve in half, and you do the same for the left sleeve. You take half stitches on the edge of your left sleeve, and you put them on the respective needles. Switch the setting for partial knitting off. So your holding cam lever should be off at this point. Knit one row from right to left. Now on the left side, cast off 20 stitches, finishing the left sleeve. So from this point on, we will be knitting and joining our front and back as we go. When you finish with your back and you take your garment off the needles, you will end up with completely finished and ready to wear garment. Keep the one needle transfer tool in your left hand. Keep it handy. So now we will continue with adding the edge stitches in every second row, half of the edge stitches to the edge needles.
Провязывайте по 2 ряда.
Knit 2 rows. And after knitting 2 rows, add 1 edge stitch to your edge needles on the left and on the right. It's important to use the outer half of your edge stitches. Now all you have left is enjoy the process, because you're close to finishing your garment. After we finish with our t-shirt, we will add an extra accessory to it. We will add a hood. But if you're tired of knitting and you're ready to wear your garment, well, go for it. Wear it without a hood for a while, and when you're ready for more knitting, come back and we'll add the hood to your t-shirt. So continue in this manner, joining as you go for the remaining rows. Probably noticed we were not using any weights to knitting this garment. So our t-shirt is ready. All we need to do is cast off.
Закрываем петли петлей ловить.
We're casting off using our latched tool, and you will end up with only 2 tails that you will need to weave in. So after we finish with our cast off, we will need to steam our freestyle naughty t-shirt, and I recommend that you leave the holes alone, because if you try to steam the edges around the holes, then they will become straight, and we don't want them straight with straight edges. We want them curly. So at our next knitting, we will add the hood to our t-shirt. That would add the extra flair to this unusual garment. So after you've finished with your casting off, you have two tails that you need to weave in. So your seams look this neat if you did everything right. I prefer weaving in using my really thin fine gauge latched tool. I would guess that it's possible to buy them or find them in any country in the world. So to weave this end in, I'm going through half the stitches, kind of putting half the stitches on my latched tool. Then I hook the tail and pull it through all the stitches that I put on my latched tool. So we're going to do the same thing with the second tail that we have left, and after that we will steam our garment and it will be ready to wear. As you can see, we do this kind of a circular motions as we add stitches to our latched tool, and then we pull the tail through. And cut the rest off. Let's go steam it. So we're steaming our garment, paying special attention to the seams on the sides. I like the curly edge for this particular t-shirt, this particular top, because that goes well with our decorative holes. So I'm not going to steam the whole garment, every single inch of it. So I will leave the edge that much curly. So as long as I don't steam it, it will remain curly like that. And I like it this way. So again, I'm steaming the rest of the garment, carefully avoiding all the edges around the holes. We want them to stay curly. We need to carefully steam the seams on the sleeves themselves. And then we do the same to the opposite side. As I mentioned earlier, the part of the garment where we have most of the holes, I'm just going to leave alone, and I'm not steaming it. I want it to remain curly. there you are. You can wear this garment one way or the other. So here you go. This is our first garment. And until we're ready to add the hood to it, we can actually wear it just as it is without it. So as you can see, our back is a little different than the front. And as long as I don't have the hood attached to this t-shirt, I can actually switch front and back and wear it backwards, depending on my mood. Take a closer look to the chart for this t-shirt.